afraid you don't mean it.
Severance Season 2 is out now. Well, one episode is out now. New episodes come out every Thursday evening on Apple TV Plus. I've seen the whole season, however. I received all 10 episodes as screeners before the season began and watched them all, and I've actually watched the season pretty much 1.5 times now, so I'm still working through it a second time. I'll probably watch it 3 or 4 times. I watched the first season 3 times. I think Severance is one of the best TV shows I've ever seen. It's certainly one of the best TV shows of the modern TV era, and one of the best shows that you can watch that's coming out right now. I think it's Apple's best as well, right up there with Slow Horses and a couple other shows that I really like on Apple TV. Season 1, I thought, was just an absolute masterpiece. A lot of people misguidedly describe it as slow or a slow burn. I think it does start off as a slow burn, but it ends up really amping up in the end. I think the last 3 episodes of season 1 are just some of the most intense episodes of TV I've ever watched. I've called it a masterclass in rising tension, and it really is. Like, it just builds and builds and builds, and there's so many layers. And there's so many things about Severance that make it great. There's the characters and the actors who portray them are terrific, and it's just produced so beautifully. The cinematography is incredible. I mean, this is a show that largely takes place in an office building, with fluorescent lights and white walls and green carpets, but somehow it's just so artfully filmed. It's just a tremendous work of cinematic art. And Season 2, in many ways, kind of amps up a lot of that. Now, I'm not going to talk spoilers for Season 2. I will sort of dive into the premise of Season 1 and talk about that. So if you haven't seen Season 1 yet, you may not want to watch this video. But this will be a spoiler-free video as far as Season 2 is concerned. I don't want to give away any details. I'll just talk about kind of what works for me and kind of what... There were, I think, a couple things that didn't quite work for me. I don't think Season 2 is as good as Season 1 overall, but it's one of those things where, like, Season 1 was so good that I'm not sure it was even possible for them to top it. But they didn't drop the ball. They didn't fumble. I've seen, I really enjoyed the show Yellow Jackets, and I thought the first season of Yellow Jackets was tremendous, and they really dropped the ball in Season 2. The quality just fell off a cliff. The writing fell off a cliff. It was just such a disappointment, and that's not the case here, which is, really good news, because this was one of the shows that I was worried about. Not because I thought the people making it weren't, skilled enough to do it, but just because this is a hard act to follow. Season 1's a hard act to follow, and just the nature of the show with all the mystery and wanting to have satisfying reveals, that's something that always makes me nervous. So anyways, Season 1 introduces us to this alternate world. And I say alternate world because it's an alternate world in a similar way to, like, the John Wick movies being an alternate world to our own. In Severance, for instance, we do have, you have smartphones and all the modern technology, but if you look at every car that everybody drives, like if you look at the parking lot at Lumen, they're all like 1980s cars. Nobody drives a modern car. And that's just a weird detail. And I didn't really notice it until Season 2. But it's true. Nobody drives modern vehicles. They're all old. But we're not like, this doesn't take place in the 80s. It takes place in a modern world with smartphones and the internet and all that sort of stuff. And this, this is the stuff in Lumen itself, the actual technology that the macro data refiners are using and whatnot, is all weirdly analog, and it feels kind of like a weird retro futuristic vibe within the confines of the severed floor. But even outside, in the outside world, it is just different. It's just slightly different in weird little details, and they don't really go into that. But it makes for a much more interesting story, I think. But anyway, so Season 1 introduces us to this technology, Severance technology, and this is used by this company, Lumen, to sever your consciousness between your work life and your home life. Although we learn in Season 1 that that's not the only time that this is being used. For instance, there's a whole segment where Devin, Mark's sister, goes to a birthing retreat and encounters a woman who has been severed just for the birthing process. So her severed consciousness only exists to give birth, and the rest of her life she can just go without ever experiencing that painful ordeal, which is super troubling when you think about it. The whole thing is deeply disturbing, the idea that your work conscious only lives in the confines of this severed floor in the basement of this office building. They don't sleep. They enter through the elevator, and when they exit, they just enter right back again. Right? They live not 24/7, but I guess 12/7, 8/7, however long they're in there each day. That's their entire existence. They were never born. They don't know anything about the outside world. It's an interesting premise. It's very much like a Black Mirror episode, right? So this company Lumen, we discover, has all sorts of weird, creepy secrets. And one of the big secrets that's revealed in season 1 is that this whole time we think, Mark has taken this severed job because he's grieving the loss of his wife, who dies in a car accident, only to discover much later in the season that one of the severed employees down on the severed floor, Miss Casey, is his wife, is Audie's wife. And there's innies inside the severed floor, and their outside consciousness is their Audies. So this is a huge reveal, and at the end of the season, when the innies use this overtime contingency to wake themselves up in the Audi world, Mark S., the innie, discovers this fact. And at the very end of the season, he shouts, "She's alive!" And then the sort of one of the floor managers, Mr. Milchick, stops the overtime contingency, and all the innies are revoked and their Audis wake up. So that's a very intense end to that season. And season 2 picks up it's unclear at first how long it's been, but it picks up after the fact, right? So season 1 introduces us to this whole world, and it does so in what is very, very absolutely a slow burn at first. But the whole season picks up slowly but surely. It gets more and more intense, and it's also very, very funny. So when people describe this show as boring, I'm always a little confused, because it's the furthest thing from boring. People also describe Andor as boring, and this baffles me because Andor is not boring. There's a difference between a slow-paced show and a boring show. And I swear to God, it's just part of our modern need for instant gratification, our obsession with things like TikTok and short videos, reels, our obsession with, needing everything to be released at once and have all the answers right away, that makes people think that things like Andor and Severance are slow and boring, rather than just accepting that some shows start off slow for a reason. And that reason is that they don't just give us everything at once, that we sort of have to learn and observe and take in all the details. And sort of the great thing about Severance season 1 is that it sort of unfolds as you go. And if you pay attention, especially if you watch it a second time, you notice so many little clues and details that help sort of enrich the world and deepen the story. And it's not, in my opinion, obviously, it's not boring. There are slow and boring shows, absolutely, and I have trouble with those too. But there's something so creative and compelling about Severance. So season 2, you get to see a lot more of these characters' lives, right? Mostly in season 1, you only see Mark's life inside and outside of Lumen. You get to know his innie and his outie. In season 2, you get to see a bit more of everybody else. You get to see, what Dylan G's outie and his life is like. You get to see more of Irving's life outside, and other characters, smaller characters like Bert, Christopher Walken's character. You get to see more of the lives of Miss Cobell and Mr. Milchick and Helly R., who we learn is Helena Egan. You get to see more of their lives outside of work. So this is cool because you get to expand sort of the world and its characters in season 2. You also learn more about Lumen. In the first episode, which is out already, there's a little video that the innies are shown, and And you see in that video, spoilers, because this episode's already out, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit. But you get to see that Lumen has these facilities all over the world. And through conversation with some of the new characters that Mark S. meets, you learn that there are other severed floors all over the world, and that they have their own perpetuity wings, where in the perpetuity wing they show off the Egan family legacy and the Egan's house, and it's very cult-like. This whole Keir Egan cult that Lumen and its worshippers, I guess, follow. It's very religious. I think there's often this people describe Severance as a sort of a satire or an analogy, a dystopian view of corporate America. But I think that's a little too reductive. I think that it goes well beyond that, and we have a whole sort of religious cult element that's very much not a part of a lot of corporate America. So you have sort of this zealotry, even that some like characters like Miss Cobell are clearly like true believers, zealots almost, with a religious fervor. And, you know, the indoctrination that goes on within Lumen's severed floor with the innies is not merely a corporate indoctrination, but that corporate indoctrination is wed to a sort of religious fanaticism. And the corporate handbook is a holy text. And that's what makes this show so fucking fascinating to me. That's one of the things. The season expands in other ways that I won't go into, but you do get a lot more. That you just get more Lumen. You learn more about Lumen. You learn more about what they're up to. You learn more about Miss Casey and what's going on with her character, because as far as we knew in season 1, I mean, her outie is dead, right? Like, everyone thinks she's dead. So what's going on with her? And you do find out more about what they're doing with her. You find out more about what they're doing in the macro data refinement branch, department, whatever, what all those numbers are for. And in some ways, and this is something we're going to have to talk about again once it's all out and we can talk spoilers. In some ways, I am still making up my mind about how I feel about what it all means. And I just can't talk about it any more than that. But I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, but I'm still mulling it over. And I think that a lot rests really honestly on season 3. Like, where they take things in season 3 is going to make a big difference on how I feel, and probably about how a lot of people feel about where the direction goes in season 2 with the numbers, you know, their mysterious important numbers, with Miss Casey, with the whole Lumen plot. There are a couple episodes in the second half of the season that I felt they were a little bottle-ish. Like, I felt like the pacing was disrupted a bit towards the end of the season with episodes that sort of, they tell very self-contained stories. And in some ways, they give us really important backstory on different characters and sort of how they got to this point. And I think that's important stuff. But I didn't love the format of it. I didn't love, and maybe I'll change my mind when I see them again. And obviously, like, it's a different experience watching this all at once, you know, in a few days, as opposed to over the course of 10 weeks. But I felt like the pacing was thrown off a bit, and I felt like a couple of the revelations were a little jarring. Or at least there was one in particular. Again, I can't say what it was, but to me, it felt a little jarring and a little after the fact. Like, was this really part of the plan from the beginning, or did they sort of make this up to give the story a twist or whatever? So we'll, you know, obviously it's hard to talk about stuff like that, but pay attention as you watch the show and see what you think. Beyond that, I think that they've upped the ante in a lot of ways. The cinematography is better than ever. There's some just really incredible shots. They've done some really interesting things with the aesthetics. Like, the season is extremely blue. Like, the color blue is just everywhere. Right from the first episode, you can see, like, everyone's wearing blue now. Like, in the first season, Heliar was always dressed in different colors, but now she only wears blue. And Milchick's office is painted blue. And blue is just everywhere. And that, you know, I'm still sort of working through what that means. But it's a really interesting aesthetic choice. And then the music, the music was great in season one. I think they've done some really interesting things to give it even more intensity and to sort of ramp up the musical aspects, the score in season two. And I love that. So visually, sonically, this season is even better than the first season. As far as the story goes, I think that as we learn more, like one of the great things about it is the mystery and learning these details, but it also runs into the pitfall of like learning these details, right? Sometimes not knowing is the fun part, and as you find out more, you're not quite as satisfied as you would be. I don't think that the final episode hits quite as hard as the final episode of season one, although it definitely goes in a direction I didn't see coming and definitely sets the stage for season three, though I have no idea where they go with it. So that's good and bad. I would say that, season one had such a perfect finale with such an infuriating cliffhanger that you really can't do that again. You just can't hit the same way again. But I still think it was a good finale, and it ends in a way that's pretty surprising. So that's cool too. Anyways, that's it. I don't have much more to say without being able to talk about actually what happens. I will have to check back in with episodes as we go. There's lots of mystery here. Even in the first episode, there's mystery around Heliar and her, her story about what happened as an Audi is clearly not true. So there's questions about, what's going on there. And then obviously the mystery of Miss Casey and where she is and what they're doing with her remains. So there's much, 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 much more to dig into. And I do plan, I don't know if I'll make a video for every episode, but I will at least have a video after the finale talking about this season in more detail where we can actually talk spoilers and everything else. But let me know what you think of this show. If you're on the fence about Severance, please watch it. If you started it and you were like, no, this is weird, I don't get it, it's a little boring, this is one of those shows where I'd say, please don't give up on it. It's really, really good. It's just tremendously well made with such great acting. Like every actor in this show is phenomenal. The writing is on point, which I would say it's maybe a little less strong in season two. Just the whole season is a little less focused and tight. And so there's a little bit more, it doesn't feel messy, but it doesn't feel as focused. But it's still really good. And I definitely just say, if you're on the fence or if you gave up after a couple of episodes, go back and watch it. It is absolutely wonderful and worth your time. And there aren't a ton of shows these days where I would just like get down on my hands and knees and beg you, please watch it. Please give it a chance. But this is one of them. It is absolutely worth watching. At least once. I would say twice. At least twice. Anyways. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Severance. Let me know if there's any other shows that you've been watching that you'd like me to talk about or that I should watch. And peace.
That I may serve thee evermore. Place in me the values 9. That I may feel thy touch divine.